Working in the ICU teaches you to live with death. You see it arrive quietly, violently, unexpectedly. You learn to accept it as part of the job. But there are nights when death doesn't come alone. Nights when the heart monitor isn't the only thing that pulses, when shadows move just outside your vision, when a patient's breath stops, but something else lingers. I've seen bodies without names, patients with eyes that shouldn't open, and heard whispers through sealed rooms. I used to believe in science, in charts, in reason, but now I believe in something else too. Something that watches, waits, and sometimes that draws you in. I've been an ICU nurse for nearly 20 years, long enough to know that death doesn't always arrive with blaring alarms or crashing heart rhythms. Many deaths come more quietly than a sigh, and sometimes they don't come alone. It was a winter night, bone-chillingly cold. Wind howled through the gaps between the old window panes like it was trying to strip the building bare. Black Hollow Hospital was built in the 19th century. Thick stone walls, endless corridors, and footsteps that echoed farther than they should. The place was never built for healing, I always thought, more like a massive stone tomb than a sanctuary. Around 11:40 p.m., I got the call from the ER. A male patient, unknown identity, admitted to the ICU after a car crash. No documents, no family, no name. Unconscious but vital signs stable, strangely stable. No brain injury, no internal bleeding. But he wouldn't wake up, not after 3 hours. "We don't know who he is," Dr. Allen said as I signed the provisional admission chart. "Might be here a while. Put him in a quiet room, somewhere isolated." I chose room 9C. It sat near the end of the east corridor, an old isolation room we barely used. Darker, quieter, away from the central lights. The younger nurses said the place felt off. Some claimed the light flickered at odd times. Others said the security cam would fuzz randomly. I didn't care. Most fears come from tired eyes and overworked minds. But that night, as I pushed his bed in, my hands trembled slightly. I couldn't tell if it was the cold or something else. He was in his 50s, maybe, prematurely gray. His face was lined but sharply defined. I noticed an old scar on his chest, thin, crescent-shaped, almost like an eye drawn in a single stroke. After hooking him up to monitors and IVs, I did a final check. The lights above flickered once, then steadied. I thought I heard a faint clicking sound, like fingers tapping glass. But when I turned around, there was only the curtain swaying. I shut the door. The monitoring light turned green. I had no idea I'd just stepped into something I couldn't name and couldn't leave. That night passed unusually quiet. I did 3 rounds near 9C. His vitals remained unchanged, suspiciously perfect. No variations in heart rate, no reaction to pain, no pupil reflex, as if he was simply preserving himself. Breathing because something told him to, not because he needed to. Then at 4:07 a.m., an alert pinged at the nurse station, equipment failure in room 9C. I rushed down. The monitor had disconnected for 11 seconds. The screen flashed white, static rippling across it like an old television losing signal. When I entered, everything returned to normal. The man lay motionless, but the overhead light flickered, not rhythmically, but erratically, like someone flipping a hidden switch. I changed his IV line, checked his temperature. It was normal, no reason for any malfunction. I logged the incident and left. But just as I reached for the door, I heard whispering, faint, behind me. I turned fast. Nothing. only the hum of machines. Yet in the glass reflection of the window, I saw a figure standing behind me, gone the moment I spun around. The next day, the elderly man in room 9B, adjacent to 9C, asked to be moved. "She stood there all night," he said. "The woman, she was crying." I asked him for details. He just shook his head. Didn't see her face, but I heard tapping, slow, steady, on the glass. It wouldn't be the last time I'd hear that. 3 nights later, I was doing a supply check and noticed the cabinet beside the unknown man's bed slightly ajar. Inside was an old, yellowed book I hadn't seen before. I opened it. Wedged between the pages was a folded A4 sheet, a drawing, charcoal, sharp lines. A nurse stood at a patient's bedside, clipboard in hand, head tilted downward. She wore the standard white ICU uniform, hair in a high bun, a stray lock curling at the neck. But it wasn't the art that made my skin crawl. It was the details. The beige shoes I always wore, the name tag faintly visible. Elise Darnell. The wall clock behind her showed 4:07 a.m. I dropped the paper. Charcoal dust smeared my fingers. Who drew this, and when? No one on shift had seen it before. Maintenance hadn't been in the room, and the patient had never moved. Yet that same night I thought I saw his hand curl briefly around the bed rail. A twitch. Gone when I blinked. Dawn approached. I stepped out of the med room, coffee in hand, when I heard the cardiac monitor beep, an irregular spike. I ran to 9C. The man's eyes were open, pale gray, cloudy, cold. He wasn't dazed. He was staring directly at me. I called the attending, but before they arrived, he slowly raised his hand and pointed at the wall. I turned. On the opposite wall, near the clock, was a dark smudge, arc, humanoid, vaguely shaped like a nurse, head tilted, hair in a bun. I stepped back. The clock ticked. 4:06. "No one leaves," he whispered. "No one ever does." Then he closed his eyes again. Doctors arrived. He was unresponsive. Everyone thought I'd imagined it. When I returned later, the smudge was gone. But I knew what I'd seen. And worse, I started to believe the drawing wasn't a prediction. It was a warning. That night, I didn't sleep. At exactly 4:07 a.m., I stood in the corridor across from 9C. 04:06:45. The hall lights blinked once. 04:07 o'clock. The equipment inside shut down. Cam feeds went black, streaked with static. A soft click came from inside the room. I entered. The air was unnaturally cold. He was dead, eyes closed, flatline. But my right hand was marked. A charcoal smudge across my knuckles, as though someone had gripped it with blackened fingers. I opened the bedside drawer. The old drawing was gone. A new one replaced it. It was me, sitting at the end of a corridor, holding a staff folder, but I wasn't in ICU uniform. I wore maternity ward scrubs. The name tag read, Elise Darnell, Ward Maternity. 3 days later, I received a transfer notice. Effective immediately, I was reassigned to the maternity unit. They said it was due to ICU staffing restructure, but I hadn't requested it. The secretary showed me the application, signed and fingerprinted, my name, my writing. But I'd never written it. I packed my things, 11 years in ICU. On my last day, I walked past 9C. The room was locked since his death. I stared at the glass pane. Inside, faint in the reflection, was a nurse, hair in a bun, head bowed, clipboard in hand. She wasn't there when I looked again. Maybe room 9C was never empty. Maybe I never really left. There are sounds we ICU nurses learn to ignore. The faulty ventilator hiss, the low battery alarm, the soft padding of footsteps on linoleum. These aren't frightening sounds. The truly frightening sounds are the ones that shouldn't exist. And I heard one through a stethoscope from a man whose lungs had nearly stopped working. It was a Monday night in early November, rain pounding the hospital roof. Lockmore was wrapped in mist, its green emergency lights flickering faintly through the fogged windows. I was used to quiet nights like this, where life hung by a thread and death waited just outside the sterile walls. At 11:15 p.m., we admitted a new patient, male, about 27, fell from a rooftop while repairing a chimney, lungs badly contused, signs of early pulmonary edema. No family, no phone, no history. His name, according to the paramedics, was Ewan Cairns, but no ID, no medical record, no insurance. He came in alone. I was assigned to monitor him overnight. Everything seemed routine. I checked vitals, adjusted monitors, administered steroids. Then, placing the stethoscope on his chest, I froze. What I heard wasn't a wheeze. It wasn't a crackle or stridor. It was a voice, muffled, fragmented like someone whispering underwater. There's someone still in here. I jerked the stethoscope off. My heart skipped a beat. The room was empty, the hallway outside silent. Ewan's eyes remained closed. His heart monitor beeped at a calm, steady rhythm. I placed the stethoscope again, only slow, labored breathing this time. I noted abnormal auscultation in my shift log, but I didn't tell anyone. How could I explain that I'd heard a voice inside a man's lungs? The next night, Ewan remained semi-conscious, assisted by mechanical ventilation. Reflexes intact, but he showed no awareness. I tried listening again. This time I heard laughter. Not adult laughter. It was a child's giggle, echoing through liquid, warped and distant. Inside his chest. I backed away. My hands trembled. I placed the stethoscope on the other side. A door creaked, then footsteps. Heavy, rhythmic, as if pacing on wet stone. I recorded it with a small digital recorder clipped to my collar. When I played it back, just normal breath sounds. Maybe I was hallucinating, sleep-deprived, delusional, until I spoke to Agnes, the oldest nurse in our ward. She asked me out of nowhere, "You heard Dr. Leach too, didn't you? He died on that bed, lungs ruptured." I had never mentioned any names, but I had heard a voice say, "Still here, I remember, the surgery was cold." I began carrying my stethoscope even when I wasn't on shift, like a talisman or a curse. On the fourth night, a ventilator alarm blared at 2:14 a.m. I rushed in. Ewan's lungs had stopped moving. For 3 minutes there was no air exchange, no inhale, no exhale. But when I pressed the stethoscope to his chest, I still heard whispering, "We are trapped." The voice was female, old, shaky, and it came from a man whose lungs were not breathing. I dropped the stethoscope. It clattered across the floor like a snake coiling away. As I bent to pick it up, the earpieces remained in place, so I heard something else. Footsteps, slapping, running across tile. From beneath the floor, I pressed the diaphragm to the wall behind Ewan's bed just to see. I heard the same voice, faint and wet. "Please, anyone. We're stuck." Not from the body, from the fee, space itself. That night, I asked to switch shifts. I couldn't trust my senses anymore. But the following night, around the same time, 2:30 a.m., they called me back. Ewan had woken up. I rushed in. He was calm, awake, his eyes open wide, not panicked. And he was singing, not with words, just a low, slow melody, unfamiliar, alien, yet eerily structured. The glass panes on the ICU doors vibrated gently with the hum. I stood there, paralyzed. Later that morning, I brought the recording to Mr. McAllister, a retired choir master who once received treatment at our hospital. He listened carefully, then said, "That's Lamento di Spiriti, a forgotten hymn from the 1400s. Monks used it to guide lost souls toward release." I stared at him. How could he know it? McAllister shrugged. "He shouldn't. That melody's been lost for centuries." That night Ewan stopped singing, but before sedation returned, he looked at me, eyes glassy, and said, "I just sang what they whispered into me." 3 days later, he relapsed into deep coma. Doctors inserted a temporary tracheostomy. While checking the airway, we discovered something chilling. No airflow, no pressure. The lungs were still, but the trach tube began to vibrate. Not from breath, from sound. It hummed. A melody. They said it was resonance, vibration. But I knew that song. I knew it because it was the lullaby my mother used to sing to me as a child. She had died of pneumonia 7 years earlier. That night I stayed alone with Ewan. I leaned close to the trach, and I heard her voice, each word of the lullaby, each note, coming from a stranger's windpipe. I cried for the first time in years. When I looked up, Ewan's eyes were open again. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the ceiling. "They've chosen someone new," he whispered. Then his heart stopped. No explanation, no warning, nothing left behind. Just silence. I took time off after that, went back to my flat near the sea. Rain, cold, quiet. I didn't touch my stethoscope for days. Then one night, I woke up. My heartbeat felt different, not painful, just wrong. I took the stethoscope, pressed it against my chest, and I heard my own voice. "They're inside now." I dropped it, but I still heard the whisper, without any tool, in the wind, in the quiet, in the breath between seconds. Something entered me. And now, when I exhale, I don't know if it's only me breathing